Welcome to the podcast. I'm Reese Fisher,
I'm Nolan Fisher.
and today we're going to be talking about the Coen brothers. Can you put that on, not on the wood? Thank you. You don't respect wood. Oh, don't respect wood. Please fix that. An excellent start here. Excellent. So yeah, the Coen brothers.
There's just spilled water all over this table. A good start to a Coen Brothers discussion. These guys are famous American filmmakers. They've been working since the 80s. Primarily, they make crime comedies in general. I wouldn't say that I credit them with inventing American folk movies, but they definitely perfected them. They have very strong visual style, editing style, obvious writing style. Comes through in almost all of their films. Very heavy focus on sort of the pitfalls of the American dream. They oftentimes call out man's pursuit of greed or fame and how those things usually end in tragedy.
If you haven't seen them, you can't really call yourself a cinephile or that you love movies. Obviously, you definitely need to check them out. As far as their most well-known movies, I mean, Fargo was kind of what really broke them onto the scene.
Yeah, Fargo, No Country for Old Men are both Best Picture winning films, so those are the big ones. Big Lebowski obviously is a cult classic. Yeah, I think those are their biggest ones. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, I think, is kind of a cult classic. And Barton Fink from the early 90s, I think, was Palme d'Or winner. So it was like kind of put them on the map internationally.
Yeah, so we're gonna walk through a good number of their films. I have seen almost all of them, and Nolan has seen, I think, 3 more than I have. So I think you're only missing, which ones haven't you seen?
Yeah, the only one I haven't seen is The Man Who Wasn't There.
Okay.
So we're not going to talk about that at all. We're also not going to talk about Intolerable Cruelty because I don't really have anything to say about it.
How cruel of you. So as far as why we wanted to talk about the Coen brothers, aside from the fact that we are brothers and we love movies, is they really are like a cornerstone as far as I'm concerned in my own understanding of film, what film can do, but also, as Nolan said before, how American folk they are. And they didn't invent the dramedy, the drama comedy, for those of you that don't know, but they certainly brought it into the public eye and popularized it in a lot of different ways.
Well, they managed to get through the shift in American films from like the independent film not existing to becoming really popular in the early mid-90s. And then they sort of grew out of that and started making more quote-unquote studio movies. I wouldn't call their movies traditional, but they kind of just went really seamlessly through the independent cycle and then just started making stuff like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And then there's stuff in the early 2000s that we're not going to talk as much about as them kind of taking projects that Hollywood clearly just wanted to make, as opposed to, because they're known for having these original ideas. Like a lot of their stuff is very original. And then they sort of went through probably close to a 10-year span of making adaptations, stuff that's less original.
Right.
Before returning to their old ways. And there's original stuff always in between everything they do, but
Yeah, another reason why, again with the water on the wood. Oh my god, it's over there. Please get rid of that.
there's water everywhere.
Oh my god. Another reason why we chose these two brothers uh, is their stories, their storytelling techniques, and what they choose to focus on, and what they choose to almost not include in the movie. For me, is as valuable as what they do include. As Nolan said, they don't really traditionally tell the story as people imagine it, and at times, from like what I would imagine a typical viewer of movies experiencing, they might watch it and think, why are we watching this character? Or like, why are we with this person? Which kind of leads me into, I really like their characters, both their main characters that they typically have, but also they in every single movie they have one or two extremely idiosyncratic characters that uh, either act as like foils to the main person, or the main person is themselves extremely idiosyncratic. Um, but then also the dialogue is another huge piece for me that I really enjoy about them. And then their shots that they have. They typically use voyeuristic shots in a number of places throughout their movies, as well as like undulating shots that just kind of like unfurl or like unroll in a certain scene. And then the movement of the camera is always intentional. So not to knock Netflix, but in a lot of Netflix stories, whether it's TV shows or movies, the camera is constantly moving, but it's just moving for like no reason. It's just moving in order to either draw you in or keep you interested, right? And keeping interest is whatever, but there's like no artistic thought behind it, as at least from my perspective, in a lot of different ways.
Oh yeah, it's not. There's nothing about the visual choices that are trying to tell a specific story. So they're not creating meaning from images. They're using images to capture your attention and hold it as long as possible.
Yeah.
So if that means having a really dynamic image, which is usually what Netflix does, then that's what they'll do.
Right.
So everything is hyper polished. All the colors are super specific, and you can tell they've spent $5 million post-production on every project that comes through.
Yeah.
I mean, think about that piece of trash Netflix original, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Piece of trash, you say? Yeah.
Well, it's just fun. Like the Coen brothers for years were really resistant to working in TV. And then eventually they sold the rights to Fargo and have been executive producers on the show since it originally aired.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that from what I've seen in interviews, they never wanted to make a TV show at all. And I think The Ballad of Buster Scruggs is as close to TV as they'll get.
Right, because it is episodic, I guess you could call it.
And because Netflix is making TV movies. Like Netflix is they're now making these huge movies. Like they have these big budget blockbusters they're making that aren't going into theaters. But they're still functionally TV movies. So it's as if a TV studio that makes movies is making $100 million blockbusters. But the problem is, I don't know if it's a production issue or that they're just only driven by some kind of weird analytics, like why they tend to not have very engaging stories.
But I mean, I think a lot of their artistic decisions are just made by committee.
Right.
And built off of what does the audience want to see, instead of what is the like vision of the director or whoever it is that wrote it.
Yeah, and they've managed to get some high profile people to make originals for them. Like The Irishman.
Yeah.
That was Scorsese and Alfonso Cuarón with Roma.
Yeah.
Those are probably their biggest, most critically acclaimed, quote unquote, real movies. Like, those don't feel like TV movies as much.
Right.
The Irishman still suffers from the fact that it's partially like a gimmick. Like, the gimmick is, look how good we got at de-aging.
Yes.
Which, I mean, if you rewatch it now, it's already begun to age kind of strangely. Like, the de-aging stuff is okay, but
20 years from now, I think it'll, I don't want to say be not remembered, but remembered not for its intended purpose, I don't think.
yeah. And that's another, I mean, Scorsese is probably the only American filmmaker I have as much respect for as the Coen brothers, or as much interest in talking about at length with regards to the type of stories
Right.
he tells or the way he directs a movie.
Yeah. So starting out, sort of, I guess if we want to go chronologically through, Blood Simple is the first movie that I saw. Not the first movie that I saw by them, but it's their first movie that I saw by them, because they had like shorts and stuff before that, and they had another movie as well. And I do remember really being drawn in to the shots in that particular movie, as well as the way that they would either cut away during like a point of tension, or like the way the camera would either focus directly on the tension that was happening, or the tension would be like kind of on the right third of the screen or the left third of the screen. It wasn't like directly in the middle. And I felt like that was a really interesting technique, and just made me want to watch even more of them. And that movie is not the most complicated of plots, I would say, but also it's a pretty like standard, I guess, type of plot.
Yeah, I don't think the Coens are concerned with plot at any point. Like, looking at all of their movies, like, there are really only 2 or 3 of these that I would say have a complicated or convoluted plot. Those are all by design.
Blood Simple, I'm sorry to cut you off. I was thinking of Miller's Crossing, actually. Miller's Crossing is the one with the tension in the middle.
Yeah.
Or the left third or the right third. I apologize. Not Blood Simple. Miller's Crossing is that one. I agree. That I don't think they're necessarily concerned with plot. In fact, I think that they almost like invert plot, and they certainly build the story, or whatever story you want to consider it, around the characters. Like, it's completely character driven, or the characters are acting in response to an external force, or a character that is extremely symbolic of an external force in people's lives. I'm particularly thinking of Raising Arizona. The biker guy is extremely symbolic. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Obviously. The Big Lebowski, certainly. You could interpret a lot of the characters drawing the dude away from him just hanging out, trying to relax. A Serious Man, even. Definitely Barton Fink as well.
Yeah. I think you could boil down Miller's Crossing is more of a plot over character driven movie.
Barton Fink is
same is probably true with Hail Caesar as well.
Barton Fink, there are a few scenes from that always stick in my mind, and for some reason I like draw a connection between that and like The Shining in some ways.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, that's intentional.
Yeah, like specifically like the hotel, but also like, it's a struggling writer. the meetings that he has with like either the executive or whomever it is, those shots
Right.
in the guy's office really are reminiscent of a few scenes from The Shining. The the hallway burning though, like the building burning is like such a lasting image though. It's yeah, it's obviously burned into your mind.
Yeah, that's something they echo in a couple of their other later movies. The idea of the struggling artist,
Mm-hmm.
or the way in which an artist struggles for something, and they seem to laugh at the idea of a starving artist, or they laugh at the idea that an artist like romanticizes their own work,
Hmm.
because that's entirely what Barton Fink is about. Is it? There's this guy who's allegedly really good at writing, and the whole plot is that he wants to represent the poor. Like, he wants to tell a good story about American hardworking people, but the entire movie is him being consumed by trying to get money.
Yeah.
Like, he's way more concerned about, and obviously the great irony of it is that he has this quote unquote working man in front of him the whole time,
Right. Right.
who turns out to be the devil or something.
Some-
like, anyway, later on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Something not necessarily human.
but you can tell that they don't like pretentious artists. They don't like artists who are only about money. They don't like artists who even just seem to want money at all, like pursuing
Right.
money or fame.
Right.
And then I mean, you called it inversion, like story inversion. But later in their career, like, they make Inside Llewyn Davis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the opposite movie, where you're supposed to empathize with this guy who is completely rejecting money, completely rejecting fame. He doesn't care about that. And he wants to just make music. And the whole movie is he's just being punished over and over again, basically, for not wanting these things. Or he has the ability to get them and fails because he's unwilling to compromise his values.
Yeah.
But at the end of the movie, the movie is still telling us, like, no, he's right. Like, his pursuit of this is more pure than, like, Bob Dylan, who shows up at the end or whatever.
Yeah.
And you can tell that they have a lot of reverence for that idea. And that's probably their main goal through all their work, is this idea that it's more morally right, more morally conscious to basically just hone your craft and live a simple life rather than, I don't know, pursuing wealth.
Yeah, and they kind of dance that line, I think, in a lot of ways, because obviously they are successful directors, successful writers, so they can't really lay claim to the fact that they're a starving artist. But at the same time, it comes
Right. Yeah, and they're winning Oscars. And
it comes through in their movies that they do put the work in, and the reason why they are successful is not because they're focused on being successful. The reason they are successful is because they're focused on honing their craft, and they're focused on creating something incredible by focusing on those small details. I'm particularly thinking of an interview that I saw with Brolin from No Country for Old Men that he did when he was cast by the Coen brothers. I forget what the conversation was basically, but like, you know, he did his testing for it. Like, he was reading lines and acting, and they were drawn to him, and he was like not fully like committed. Like, he wasn't even like sure he wanted to do it. And they like kind of either like forced his hand or like pressured him in some way, because they knew they needed him like for that specific character. Which, by the way, if you haven't seen No Country for Old Men, probably just stop listening to this right now and come back to it. And please, for the love of everything, go watch that, and probably watch it at night. Don't watch it during the day. Speaking of another character that is extremely symbolic of something other than a person, Anton Chigurh. Holy shit.
Sugar.
What an overwhelming darkness. Yeah. But their ability to focus on those smaller details, and they consistently get it right. Like they consistently get characters right, not only in their casting, but what they're able to draw out from those characters. That makes their movies like so magical. And A Serious Man, which is actually like for me like quite a dark horse movie for them. I watched that movie, like I think I watched it on like a Friday, so it was after like a week of work and I was exhausted, and I was just like finding myself laughing openly at some of the scenes that were like either meant to be dark but also like infused with like so much humor in them. But the situations they put the guy in are just so wild that you can't help but laugh, and that dry humor like really comes out in their movies. The way that they cut away, or it's almost like too awkward of a scene for you to take, and the main character also can't take it, and they start like moving their arms or just like acting weird because they can't take it, or they just give in and they're like, all right, I guess we're doing this now, sure, let's do it.
The book.
Yeah, but they have such a wide like. So before this, Nolan and I wrote out like all of the movies that we've seen by them, and they basically fill like a page. And just seeing all of the names out there, like you forget how many movies that they made and how many of them they either wrote or directed.
Yeah, and they have a few that are less well known. They were less commercially viable. They never really got an audience either when they were released or now. Like Hudsucker Proxy, you haven't even seen.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't really recommend it. Like,
right.
It falls in line with their other stuff. Like, it's kind of just about corporate incompetence and the way in which like a company acts as a machine and just churns out money, and the way that ideas are stolen and then turned into profit.
Is it like Kafka-esque? Like
Elements of it, but very vaguely.
Okay.
It's like Tim Robbins is a account man.
Robbins?
Yeah, he's the main character.
Oh, damn.
He's like an account man for this company, and he invents the hula hoop.
The what?
The hula hoop.
Okay.
And makes this company tons of money. It's a stupid movie. It's a simple movie. It's nowhere near as good as Raising Arizona or some other stuff. It's definitely firmly in the comedy camp as opposed to the crime camp.
Okay.
Since they kind of do both. Like A Serious Man is a comedy. Yeah. Even though it's like the darkest comedy you can ever get to.
The ending of that movie still like haunts me but inspires me as well. Like I don't want to spoil it, but it's just like, dear God, what
I'm gonna have a hard time not spoiling
what
a lot
have
of
you
these
built
endings.
What have you built this movie up to? Also just to throw back into Raising Arizona, speaking of a really funny plot to choose and having a young Nicolas Cage.
Mm-hmm.
It's Nicolas Cage and what's her name?
Helen Hunt.
Helen Hunt, yeah, Mrs. Incredible's voice.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, those two together, they basically can't have a kid.
So they kidnap one from a family with too many.
And so the family is like, it's the mayor, right? Of the town.
Yeah, he's the mayor, or like a very important man.
So he hires people to find the kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then this like bounty hunter guy shows up who's like not entirely human, and he attempts to get the kid back basically. But like just picture like a Nicolas Cage with a unibrow running around Arizona, getting into like all sorts of crazy situations. The chase scenes in that actually are like pretty good. Like
mm-hmm.
they're really engaging for a comedic film.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen that. It's been a while since I've seen Blood Simple. They're both very good movies. They're kind of flawed, and they're not
Yeah.
the voice that the Coen brothers eventually developed doesn't come through the whole way with those.
Right.
Whether that be in their writing and their dialogue and their characters, but also just their storytelling. Like, they are clearly huge fans of Hitchcock.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of echoes of Hitchcock in their work. No Country for Old Men might have the most of it, but done in a way where you see stuff that's just like directly pulled from a Hitchcock movie, and then the way that they move forward with it.
Yeah.
Like, I'll give just a concrete example I can think of off the top of my head, but you have that scene where Josh Brolin is in the hotel and he has the money and he figures out that there's a tracking chip in his briefcase of money that
Right.
Javier Bardem is
Right.
finding.
Right.
And he sees that he's like at his hotel door.
You mean when Javier Bardem turns the lights out?
Yeah, in the hallway.
Yeah.
Just like Rear Window.
Right.
And so the audio, like, if you have seen all, I mean, this is a common thing across movies. Where
Intertextuality is what that's called.
Yeah,
But
you have this history of an image or a series of images. So what your brain thinks is, oh, he's in some trouble. He's gonna have to use the light to stop him somehow. And instead of it being takes a picture of him, it's the flash of the shotgun, and then he jumps out the window, which is different than Rear Window, where he's thrown out of the window.
Yeah.
Instead, he jumps out and runs, and you get this high-speed chase that's kind of like something straight out of, what's that other Hitchcock movie called with Cary Grant?
North by Northwest.
Yeah. Couldn't think of the name. And he's chased through the town, and it evolves into something else entirely, where there's the guy gets brutally shot through the neck, and there are other stuff. But
it also, I mean, to me, the mark of a good chase scene is that you're like super engaged, but then it also keeps you guessing.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the guy getting shot in the neck, like, that's what would happen if you were just a drone following this chase scene, or if you were like in the chase scene itself. It's like just mayhem happens. Like, there are people caught in the crossfire. You have no idea where they're going to end up. When like one's around the corner, they're shooting at each other. One, like, I believe he does like he almost does not like a switcheroo, but he's behind the car. He shoots like one car, or he shoots at him to make him think he's going one way, then he goes the other way, and then like doubles back, and you see that visually.
Gets the drop on him.
Yeah. So it's not just like, oh, a guy chasing another guy. Like, they interweave all of these different things. The intertextuality piece, which is what I thought you were going for, but that's referencing like another story within that story, another film within your film.
Yeah,
like they definitely acknowledge that, and they pay a lot of homage to other filmmakers in a really creative way. I think moving from Barton Fink then into Fargo.
I think Fargo's where they finally got what they were trying to do. Like, that Fargo is the distillation of a lot of their ideas come to fruition.
Yeah. Yes.
Because you have obviously the whole point of the movie is the ideal American life is this sort of hokey, nonsensical, happy marriage between this pregnant cop who is just a simpleton, like, just bumbles around. Oh yeah, oh heck, just a happy Minnesotan married to this other simpleton Norm who makes ducks, and they defeat evil basically because, I mean, she's a great detective. She's clearly smarter than her husband, who just likes stamps and wood carving. But
right, she's a simpleton, but also she is expert with sleuthing.
But they don't want for anything. Like,
No.
They're happy to just eat eggs or whatever in McDonald's for lunch, and like their simplicity doesn't get in their way, whereas I mean, the primary antagonist of the movie, William H. Macy's character, just wants more money and is way in over his head to get it. So he comes up with this scheme that he's not able to pull off. He's terrible at lying. He's not even able to like successfully con the people he sells cars to, let alone the police, which obviously all blows up in his face and he gets arrested.
I'm already getting stressed thinking about him, just to his character in that movie. Like they just
getting the phone calls and he's just like scribbling on the paper, having panic attacks. And
yeah, that like they just do such a good job with making your skin crawl over that guy and the situations he gets himself into, which is kind of another thing about them. Like they always have tragedy or like tragic elements throughout like pretty much all of their movies. And if the movie doesn't end as a tragedy, you certainly can imagine an ending that is tragic to any of the characters that, you know, it does work out for them in the end or doesn't.
Oh yeah, I mean, Blood Simple has a tragedy. Miller's Crossing, Fargo. Oh Brother, Where Art Thou doesn't necessarily have a tragedy, but obviously
Right.
it has those elements of Greek storytelling.
No Country for Old Men.
Yeah,
Burn After Reading.
Serious Man, Inside Llewyn Davis in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
yeah,
In some way, and then clearly Macbeth. Not that we'll talk about.
It's called The Tragedy of Macbeth.
How could you? Yeah. I haven't seen True Grit. I definitely need to see that.
Yeah, True Grit is a remake of an old Western with John Wayne, which is not a good movie.
Oh, got it.
I don't like that movie at all. You can tell the Coen brothers love Westerns, and they've got...
Yeah.
It seems like they've become more interested in making them more recently.
Right.
True Grit is a pretty good... It's not my favorite Coen brothers movie. It's like a revenge tale, kind of. It's like a little girl hires a very old sheriff guy.
Right.
To go find the gang that killed her parents.
Right. Can you define a Western? Because do you remember that one video that you sent, or that one conversation we had where we were talking about how like Westerns are made nowadays and like how like the modern Western is? Because it's
I don't remember that video, but...
Oh. Well, No Country for Old Men is a Western.
Yeah.
So the reason why it's a Western is because of what? Like, what elements do you need for a Western?
I mean, you basically need a lawman and some kind of outlaw. It has to vaguely be set in the desert or in the quote-unquote new, like, unsettled land.
Right.
Like, at the heart of a lot of Westerns is the conflict between man's, like, wild nature and the, like, inevitability of society building around that.
Right. So the reason I was asking is because there are a lot of modern Westerns that don't take place in like the desert, or they don't take place in the West, right? And so what I'm trying to say is the Western has transformed in a lot of ways, but it's still thematically as well as like character wise is that Western, isn't it? There's some like outside force that is playing upon either the main character or is the outlaw.
I mean, the outside force is the law, usually.
Right.
The whole point is that Westerns are, like, a lot of, even 60 years ago, Westerns were about the end of the West.
Yeah.
Because the West kind of, like what we think of as the gunslinging West, the end of that coincided with the beginning of Hollywood.
Right.
And so there's an inherent link between the romanticization of John Wayne with a gun hunting bad guys / being a bad guy and movies, which is why Westerns used to get made all the time.
Yeah, so
I'm not sure what new examples you're thinking of. Like the only one I could think of is vaguely Wind River in terms of one that's not set in like the desert, but it's
Yeah.
the same location functionally.
Right.
Big gorgeous mountains, large landscape shots, tons of wide shots, tons of deep focus, a lawman hunting things down.
I think maybe the video is also talking about like what's that called? SVU.
Law and Order.
Yeah. I mean, like Law and Order is not a traditional Western. It's like almost like an inverted Western or something. I forget what it is. But anyway, the reason why I was asking is because I feel like thematically the Western is essentially saying that you need like you need a human being who is willing to just completely like be able to match not the evilness of evil, but be able to physically match evil or respond to that bad force. Like that seems to be what the Western is driving at, and human beings are that force that are able to match that. But also human beings are the ones that are evil as well.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, what like Westerns specifically as a genre does hinge upon like tons of landscape shots, like naturalistic landscape shots.
Right.
It's why they're like that. I would say is the primary reason that these like a police procedurals are not Westerns.
Yeah.
Plus that and the fact that there's really not a perspective for the bad guy. It's just the lawmans working together to hunt down someone, and you don't know who it is.
Right. Right.
But our perception of the Western genre is fucked up because like what was the Western genre for a good 40 years in Hollywood and just world cinema in general was one thing.
Yeah.
It was John Ford movies.
Okay.
And people copying John Ford. Vaguely, Howard Hawks got around it. There are a few other directors who made some big, successful Westerns. But by and large, John Ford Westerns were the staple of the genre.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the famous Westerns people are aware of now are the Leone Westerns.
Correct.
Which are literally just postmodern anti-Westerns. Like those movies shit on everything about other Westerns.
Yeah.
And we like those ones because A, they're funny.
Yeah.
They're offbeat. B, they're violent. And C, they're morally gray. Which were not the same as those older Westerns.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like High Noon or Rio Bravo or... I mean, Stagecoach to a lesser extent, but those are all not about moral ambiguity. They're about moral righteousness.
And certitude.
Yeah. And the spaghetti Western is to say, no. The Old West would not have been like this. This was not about good lawman stopping evil law. Like, this is about the way in which there's an odd brotherhood. Like, those Man with No Name movies are about kind of the connection between these morally gray, sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes just evil characters, and how they're in agreement that they're on the same side against the encroaching buildup of civilization.
Yeah, and there are elements sprinkled in of revenge, depending on the movie.
There's lots of old revenge westerns.
Right. Sorry, I didn't mean to go on that tangent, but I felt like it was worth talking about.
Just to describe the Western, yeah. True Grit is just an old John Wayne Western. Like, it's just a very standard Western.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a very exciting movie. I don't think John Wayne was a good actor, but that's
How dare you?
Something for another. He's a bad actor and worse person. I've got nothing to really say about John.
How dare
Wayne.
you? No, I mean, I don't. I don't have any strong feelings towards him.
I liked when he was in blackface in that Genghis Khan movie.
Oh, yeah,
that was funny.
Robert Downey Jr.'s inspiration.
Yeah, I mean that's an incredible role. But that's enough really to say about A Serious Man. Whereas No Country for Old Men, I think, in some way helped revitalize a small pocket of American Western genre films.
Okay.
Because there's probably only been, of the major studio system, 20, 25 Westerns in the last like 15 years.
Hell or High Water
Yeah.
certainly comes to mind.
That's definitely the best one.
Right.
That's, what's his name? That guy who wrote that movie.
Hell or High Water?
Yeah. He wrote Sicario, and he directed Wind River and wrote that as well.
Oh.
Taylor Sheridan?
Sheridan.
Yeah, Taylor Sheridan. That guy is making a lot of Western stuff. He seems to understand the genre through and through and is an excellent dry writer.
Isn't he the lawman in Sons of Anarchy?
He's in it at some point, yeah.
Yeah, he's the sheriff or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure. Burn After Reading. Just wanted to bring that one up because that one really, really about a third, 2/3, halfway through the movie really smacks you in the face in a lot of ways and catches people off guard, which is something the Coen brothers consistently do, but it just like
changes the tone of the whole movie.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that almost reminds me of, in a lot of ways, like a Korean movie, because it starts out going one way. Not to say all Korean movies are the same, but it's a common thread between many Korean films I've seen, in that the movie starts out one way and you're like, oh, okay, it's going to be this type of movie. And then all of a sudden, like halfway through, something happens and you're like, what the heck am I watching now? This is not what I thought it would be, in like a good way. Like it completely shifts gears and shifts everything about it in a lot of ways. But
well, yeah, because it's I forget how the narrative is framed. If it starts with the government guys investigating stuff,
I think it starts with
like those two guys, and then it devolves into the Frances McDormand is blackmailing John Malkovich, who's an ex-CIA analyst, so that she can afford to get a boob job.
Yep. And
So
Brad
it's-
Pitt is a trainer who is not entirely in shape as Brad Pitt normally is,
Yeah.
which is amazing.
And it's weird because that movie doesn't follow a lot of the like screenwriting conventions of like how to tell a story, because
No.
the major inciting incident doesn't happen until late, which is
Yeah.
George Clooney shooting Brad Pitt in the face accidentally.
That was what I was referring to. Yep.
I'm not worried about spoilers. This movie's 15 years old. People can go watch that.
Yeah, and many people don't like it, and many people do like it, just because of how.
I think it's a good prepper
Off-kilter.
for a serious man. This can get into something deeper I want to talk about, which is one of the Coen's strongest suits as artists. But like Burn After Reading's absurdness, like you have to understand what the movie means, like what the movie's about at the end, because obviously like everyone dies except for George Clooney.
If you're under 20,
and Frances McDormand.
if you're under 20 and you watch that movie, watch it again like 5 years later.
Yeah, you might not get it the first time. I don't know if I did, but like
I certainly didn't. I certainly did not. I don't remember how old I was when I watched it, but I was probably like, 16 or something.
well, I think that's the
17.
Coens. That's a lot of their ethos as filmmakers, is they want to make comedies for people to enjoy, but they also are so good at writing philosophy and conflicting philosophy
Yes.
with a message that is the undercurrent of a lot of their better work.
Yes.
No Country for Old Men is probably the prime example, and that's the one they've been recognized the most for.
Is
And that and The Big Lebowski, and A Serious Man is just the most complicated they get with it. But
Yeah, and that's why I love it so much. That movie, A Serious Man, I'm glad I watched later on as opposed to like Burn After Reading, because I feel like Burn After Reading while it was certainly surprising, I think A Serious Man is far and away better than it, in a lot of
Oh,
ways.
definitely.
Um, is Miller's Crossing the one that opens with like a weird like scene in rural Russia?
No, that's A Serious Man.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Serious
Really?
Man starts with a short film where
Yeah.
there's two like Orthodox Jewish people who
Yeah.
are visited basically by a spirit of their dead uncle.
Yeah.
And it sets the tone for the whole movie because, I mean, not only is the story that the guy tells them relevant to the understanding, but also just the theme of that short film, which is basically it doesn't matter whether or not this guy is a ghost because the couple can't agree if this guy is a ghost
Yes.
or not.
Yeah.
The wife is like, this is a dibuk, this is an evil demon. And
Yeah.
the guy is like, no, he didn't die. He's normal. Like, we need to feed him.
Right.
And she's like, we absolutely can't. And it pairs later with is the guy dead? Is he alive? Does he have gets cancer and it's unclear if he's just going to die. And at the same time, the kid is watching as a tornado is going to come destroy his school, kill him and his whole, and it ends without, this quote unquote sense of closure.
Right.
Which is why I think some people might not like this movie because there isn't closure.
And that's why I think it's so good, because it just cements the idea that there aren't any answers out there, and why every day are you looking for meaning in whatever you're doing, when like the answer is there is no answer. Like, you just have to try to do whatever it is that you enjoy doing and stop trying to question whether or not it's real or not. Like life.
Right.
Like that's ultimately what it's getting at, is like, it doesn't matter whether or not it's real or not. Like, you just are. You're existing. You're doing this thing. You're blessed with these people. You're blessed with this life. You're not blessed in some ways. You may not be blessed in a lot of ways, but also it begs the question, should you be kind to people? Should you like give to people who are like less fortunate than
I think
yourself?
its main question is, should you have faith?
Yeah.
Because the whole time he's being told, like, you need to go talk to the rabbi. You don't have enough faith. And then it highlights the absurdity of the Jewish faith, while also paying a lot of respect to sort of the cultural heritage of Jewish people.
Correct.
So it's a meditation on the use of faith in life, harkening back to the first scene where the woman has faith and is basically infuriated that the husband doesn't, even though the husband has faith that this is his uncle. Yeah. And not a ghost.
Right. But I don't think it's making an argument you should have faith. I think it's saying I guess it might be.
I definitely think it is.
It's saying you should have faith, but not in like a traditional religious sense. I think it's more talking about...
No. Not in a religious sense.
It's more talking about potentially faith in humans, like other humans, faith in yourself as well, but also...
Yeah, faith in things just working out.
Yes. And definitely a faith in like a certain philosophy. I don't know if we wanted to try to figure out what that philosophy might be, but yeah, I think that movie in particular really asks a lot of questions, and despite it seemingly not answering those questions, I think it does.
I think it answers every question. Does. Yeah, there just isn't an inherent quote-unquote closure to the plot.
No, because a tornado comes at the end, and if there's a 13-year-old who, for his bar mitzvah, got obliteratingly stoned and like could barely function, and
yeah, that was definitely autobiographical.
That scene is so funny.
One of the Coens definitely got really high for their bar mitzvah,
and borderline their brain wanted
melted.
To escape from their body and run, but
the rabbi having to correct them when he's just like,
he's staring blank faced,
trying to do the
constantly. Yeah.
I think they're my three favorite of their movies are No Country for Old Men, Serious Man, and The Big Lebowski. I think those three are not only the funniest, they're the most engaging story-wise and character-wise, and the richest philosophically.
Why did you have to say that before me?
What do you mean? Were you about to say that?
Those are my favorite three. I'm surprised you didn't say Fargo.
No, those other three definitely are.
I do remember when I watched A Serious Man. That was when I lived in Westwood. And I remember texting you and just like freaking out about how good it was. And I couldn't believe I hadn't seen it before, just because like how much I love the Coen brothers. Yeah, I don't think I like it more than The Big Lebowski. I don't think I like it more than No Country for Old Men. Did I really write? I thought I wrote No Country for Old Man.
This is no country for this old man.
No, it's A Serious Man, not a
seriously old country man.
Yeah, the Big Lebowski. I mean, that movie is one that it's actually probably a movie that I've seen almost the most. Like my top 5 most watched movies, it's definitely on there, just because of how fun it is. Philosophically, it's great. It both asks a lot of questions but also answers them. It in some ways the end is emotional in some capacity, while also still being terrifyingly hilarious.
Oh, it's definitely emotional. Like the whole point is that even though there were no stakes the whole movie, there were stakes because their friendship was at stake, and the guy just dies unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Walter, Donnie's been shot. There were no shots fired. Dude, he's having a heart attack. Call an ambulance. just like...
Right. And I think that...
tries to hand him the Nazis the Germans the money, and don't worry, Donnie, these men are cowards.
These men are cowards. We believe in nothing.
Yeah, give us some money or if he kills a girl.
Yeah.
Carl Hungus. I just think it's like the funniest movie ever made.
There are so many quotes in that are iconic.
Do you have any leads? Leads. Yeah, they got us working in shifts.
Clearly you're not a golfer.
Just every line. That goat fucker in Iraq.
Yeah, what I was gonna say before that, all of the insanity of the memery of that movie was, I think that movie also gets at the thread that A Serious Man also is tugging at, which is that life is really absurd, man. And you trying to find all of these answers, or you trying to tell other people answers, that's not really necessarily like how it works. And it's absurd. I mean, you kind of have to embrace that in a lot of ways, is what it's saying. You have to embrace its absurdity. It doesn't really say it's to be kind to other people.
No, not at all.
But yeah, I mean, the nihilists, not like clearly it's not saying you should believe in nothing.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point is, by and large, humans and art in general tries to answer some question about searching for meaning and giving an answer to the search for meaning.
Yeah.
And No Country for Old Men and The Big Lebowski answer that question thoroughly.
Yes.
I mean, A Serious Man does too, but in a very different way that talks about faith. The other two movies don't touch on that aspect.
Correct.
But they certainly answer The Big Lebowski is most concerned with, what is now considered a religion, dudism.
Yeah.
Which is his, the way he moves through life. And it forces you to understand that it doesn't mean you don't care.
Yes.
Because that makes you a nihilist, and nihilists are cowards.
Yeah.
And they're not even nihilists because the whole point is they just want money.
Yeah. Correct.
And it's saying most people who are nihilistic just want money, and all people who just want money are nihilists. Whereas the dude doesn't give a shit about that.
Yeah.
He's not an alcoholic. Like, he's not a drug addict. He's not an alcoholic. But anytime he gets the chance, he's going to have a White Russian and he's going to smoke a joint.
Yeah.
And he doesn't mind. He just wants to go bowling and hang out with his friends and listen to whale songs in the bathtub.
Put half his hair up.
Yeah, he's not concerned in the slight. And the movie shows you that's the best way to be. Because when you get stuck in all the minutia of searching for something, like his search for materialism is obtaining a rug because his rug has been miterated upon.
Yeah. It really tied the room together, man.
Yeah. Smokey, this is not nom. There are rules.
I didn't watch my friends die face down in the muck for this. I'm finishing my coffee. I'm finishing it. I don't care. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? No, Walter, you're not wrong. You're just an asshole.
They do even manage in that movie to get in those barbs about the pretentiousness of art, because Julianne Moore's character is this pretentious painter, and it basically equates what she does to making pornography, because not only is she interested in like nudity and nude artwork, but then also she just straight up shows Lebowski a porn video because the character he's looking for is a porn actress.
Yes.
And so it equates these things together, and then also it basically is saying, like, it circles the whole thing into one piece, where like Jackie Treehorn, the pornographer, and Maud, the painter, and Jeffrey Lebowski, the old man, and the nihilists are all cut from the same cloth. They all want the same thing, and they're all in a way a whore for money.
Yes.
And they're all a nihilist.
Yes.
And the only
because
one
money is nothing.
Yeah, and the only one who gets it is the guy who pings between them all, who accomplishes nothing for any of them.
Yep.
And comes away with vaguely impregnating a lady.
And a face full of ashes.
Yeah.
A face full of his friend's ashes.
Good night, sweet prince.
Out of a coffee cup, a coffee urn.
Walter, what was that shit about now?
Walter's bawling as well. Yeah. Right.
Is our most modestly priced urn.
David Thewlis just cackling to himself while Julianne Moore talks some shit about vaginas. Yeah. Oh brother, where art thou? Definitely Greek tragedy in some ways, like,
yeah, quote unquote a remake of the Odyssey.
Yeah.
Or take on the Odyssey.
Yeah.
According to them.
Which it definitely has elements of
similar to Big Lebowski in that their journey ends up being kind of meaningless. Like, it's just like a series of non sequitur, nonsensical events and pieces of bad fortune that befall the three characters.
To which the audience, if they're thinking at all, actually derives meaning from.
Yeah.
Which I think is the point of all of their movies, is if you're actually thinking about what you're watching instead of like, why are these characters doing this? They're weird. Why is there no story? I don't get why there's no story. If you just stop asking those questions. You're asking the wrong questions. And then The Lady Killers. The Lady Killers is a remake, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love the original. The original is like from the mid-50s. It's a British black comedy.
I don't know.
Starring Alec Guinness.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great
Obi-Wan,
movie.
Obi-Wan Kenobi, yeah. The OG Obi-Wan.
Who should be known for many things, least of all Star Wars. But
yeah.
Yeah, he's great in it. It's the original is kind of dry, like it has a very dry wit to it, but it is a very dark comedy and it's shot brilliantly. The Coen's version is ridiculous. I don't know what happened. I'm sure it's what they intended in a way, but it's too slapsticky. Like it's too over the top childish.
Yeah.
Like, you have a character who shits himself all the time. You have a dude who's like chain smoking cigarettes and puts them in his mouth. You have, I think, Marlon Wayans being himself. I don't remember if that's him.
Marlon Wayans, I think. Yeah, I think it is him.
And of course, Tom Hanks is the main character. But yeah, I am not the biggest fan of their version of Lady Killers. It's definitely not as good as the original, just because the tone doesn't really line up.
Correct.
Like, a lot of the time, tone is one of the Coen's strongest suits of being able to blend very absurd humor with very dark comedy or just straight up intense violence.
Yes.
In a way that's completely different than a lot of their contemporaries from the 90s and 2000s, like Quentin Tarantino.
Right.
Because the Coens don't have a flashy style.
No.
But the Lady Killers feels flashier.
It is definitely flashy. Yeah. And that is what hurts it in a lot of ways. I don't know if it's because it came out at that time and they were like trapped by like the mindset of that time or what. Also, I wanted to go back to what you were talking about with The Big Lebowski, with Maude, the artist, with Jackie Treehorn, the pornographer, and the nihilists. Most of those characters function in other stories as just like, oh yeah, let's come up with a wild character to put in the story. And you're like, okay, but why are they in the story? And it's like, oh, because, they're interesting. They're just a weird guy. They're just a weird person. They're a weird woman. Like, yeah, this lady, she paints nude. She flies in on like a trapeze thing, like throwing paint from above, and then walks around like naked and saying vagina and rod and stuff like that.
Johnson.
Yeah, like, but the character, but they have those characters in the movie specifically just because they're interesting, but they don't do anything with it. You know what I'm talking about? Where like you'd have a Jackie.
I mean, other movies are
yes.
Yeah.
They just have that weird person, and the audience is like, oh, that's a weird person, but that's it. Whereas the Coen brothers, they make those specifically strange characters and they use them in order to reinforce the messages that they're trying to send, or to have the character not even just develop as a character, but like to push against that character in order to have them respond in a certain way.
Oh yeah, well you can tell they've read a lot of noir and they've
Yes.
seen a lot of noir, and noir is an odd genre that's actually really difficult to get right.
Are you saying noir?
Yeah.
Oh,
what does it sound like I'm saying?
I don't know. It sounds like you're beginning narwhal and saying
No, noir. Yeah.
Oh, I think I say
Noir.
Yeah, not noir.
It's a French word. I don't like the French.
Noir.
And I don't like their language. Noir. Say noir. No. Yeah, it's a tough coppers, eh? Can't help it.
So it's a difficult thing to get right.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of modern noir movies that have just failed because they're being made by people who saw but didn't understand the meaning behind a lot of older noir movies.
Yes.
The Coens understand them through and through.
Yes.
And The Big Lebowski seems like it's in a weird way a remake of The Long Goodbye.
Okay.
Which is a Robert Altman movie. It's a Philip Marlowe story.
Yeah. I mean,
but it's a very absurd noir where James Caan is Philip Marlowe, and a bunch of increasingly absurd things happen to him in a convoluted plot.
James Caan.
Yep.
Oh. Have I seen that?
Is it James Caan?
I don't think it is.
No, I can picture him. He has a haircut that looks like a James Caan haircut from the same time.
Okay. But I mean, I knew it was Philip Marlowe just because it's called The Long Goodbye. You've got The Long Goodbye, The Big Sleep. I don't know what the other ones are, but
Elliot Gould. Sorry.
can I see what he
He
looks like?
really does not look like James Caan.
His face does.
But he does
His
a,
face
a
does.
bit in the movie. But at any rate, like, I think that's a big problem with a lot of
Right.
modern noir. Like, obviously, noir is like a very specific genre. Like, it was based on how it's usually classified. Noir is a period of time where there were a bunch of expressionist, mystery, hard-boiled detective stories from like the 30s, 40s, and vaguely 50s.
Right.
And it was just a time period, and a lot of people have a lot of different ways of describing what it's really about, but primarily the best example I've heard was by Paul Schrader, who defines a lot of noir as being a response to the increasing grayness of the world, like moral ambiguity, in response to World War I and World War II, most specifically.
It's kind of crazy because doesn't it also coincide with like color televisions in some way?
When it ended?
When it started.
No.
Or when it ended, I guess.
Yeah,
it would be.
color TV didn't really hit the markets until like the 50s.
That's just a coincidence, but it is odd.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah. But then, there are a lot of neo-noirs or noir-adjacent movies. Chinatown is probably the most notable neo-noir,
yes,
which people might just consider noir, but it really isn't at all because it's not black and white, but it has all the same other similarities. But I wanted to mention Chinatown based off of what you said before, because it's one of those movies where it's like no character is wasted. No scene is wasted. Even though a lot of scenes, if on your first watch through, maybe feel kind of slow, like it feels like they are telling you a lot, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. And then by the end, it all comes together. Everything makes sense. He was on the right trail all along, and it crashes down all around him. And that's just Chinatown.
I also was thinking of Chinatown, but I don't know why I was thinking it. It was just hanging as a fog in my head that I wanted to get back to.
Noir movie set in LA, like Big Lebowski.
Yeah, like I was thinking it before you even started down the road of noir. That movie I could talk about for a while, and I think we should put into
we'll talk about Polanski at some point.
A string of either Polanski or a string of movies coupled with Chinatown. But is there any other piece here that you think we're kind of missing out on that we haven't quite touched on? I think we've talked about.
There are a few of these movies we haven't talked about. Maybe as much as I want to. Yeah.
Okay.
No Country for Old Men I want to talk about more. I want to talk about the philosophy of No Country for Old Men. Because I think it's one that I hear people talk about that they get tripped up on.
Okay.
The background is this was a 2005 novel by Cormac McCarthy.
Yes.
I've not read a lot of his work. We've both read Blood Meridian from like the last year.
We're going to need to do an episode on that.
We'll talk about that undoubtedly. But that book is 20 years younger.
I'm going to order that book right now because I really want to read it.
No Country for Old Men.
Yes.
Yeah, so that book came out and the Coens got to make the movie, and the movie is fairly different from the book.
Okay.
But it's a lot more concerned with fate and chance. And a lot of people who don't like the movie, I think, don't like it because of the ending. Because the movie obviously subverts the idea of the hero.
Yes.
In a way that other Westerns definitely don't approach. It subverts the idea of the lawman, which is, hence the title, No Country for Old Men. Like, the whole point of it is it's set in the 70s, and it's about a sheriff who basically peaked in the 50s, and he feels old.
Yeah.
And he feels that the world has grown much darker than he's used to, and he can't handle it anymore. So it ends with him retiring, kind of in response to what he's witnessed, in this weird way where an innocent man is wrapped up in this scheme and is killed by it because of his own greed, because he wants to keep the money. At any point, he could have kind of just given up the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then there's also the villain who says, I don't care. I don't care. You can give me the money. I'll still kill you just for inconveniencing me.
Yeah.
And then that's the...
It's not even so much that. It's not even like trepidation over the inconvenience. It's just, as we've said before, I don't think he's entirely human. Like he is human. Like he gets hurt, right?
Yeah.
But like his reasons and like rationale are like not human, which sure you can say he's a psychopath.
They explain that in the movie, though.
Yeah.
Like he's meant to be a stand-in for death in a way.
No,
like he's an illusion or allegory for death. But
yeah, I just think it's worth noting that I don't think he's killing him necessarily for revenge, but more so like almost it's kind of like, this is even like scarier, but almost out of like interest. It's like, oh, you've got this money. Okay, you're going to give it up. I don't care. I've been spending all of this time going after you. I'm just going to finish it.
I mean, most of the people he kills, he doesn't kill for money. He doesn't care about the money. No. He does in a way, like he wants it, but
sugar.
It's a means to an end for him to get the money by the end. But he just wastes everyone. Like he kills the people who hired him. He kills the people who originally had the money, these Mexican cartel drug dealers. He kills Llewellyn. He kills Llewellyn's wife.
Who hires him?
Stephen Root. Stephen Root is some kind of shady corporate businessman who shows up in 2 scenes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He hires him. Yeah. And he goes out to the...
Stephen Root being the guy from Dodgeball.
Mm-hmm.
And the Busters. Okay.
Yeah, Stephen Root is in
almost all of them.
A lot of their movies.
Almost all of them. So okay, got it. I mean, that kind of also is really symbolic that, you know, I don't know if you're connecting the dots here between money and death, but
yeah.
People use money in order to rain death down upon whomever they want to, and other people die because of it. Other people are caught in the crossfire.
There's a lot of subtext in that movie about Vietnam specifically.
Right.
Because Llewellyn and Sugar and even Woody Harrelson's character, who's briefly in the movie, are all vets of the Vietnam War. And it's mentioned a few times, and there seems to be an implication in there that like the destruction of their innocence in a way is because of is it not picking it up?
I just would move your hand so the mic can hear you.
They lose some innocence in serving in the war.
Yeah.
But this preparedness is what allows them to live in this dark world. And it's how they're able, like they are the men to inherit this country, not the old man.
Yeah. And I think it's significant that he, Tommy Lee Jones, he is not a vet, correct?
Not that they ever say, no. And he makes it clear that he's seen very few gunfights. Like he's seen no violence in his day-to-day life as a long-term lawman.
Right. So him being a guy who was still at home during the war, he is unable to deal with the darkness. He's unable to deal with that evilness and with seeing like, I mean, Llewellyn is not entirely like innocent, especially since he's like a vet. Like he doesn't have perfect innocence still.
Oh yeah, he's the one that takes the money.
Right.
He seeks the money out and then holds on to it too long.
But the tragedy within the movie is what you said is what breaks Tommy Lee Jones's character in a lot of ways, and continually from death being meted out by Sugar.
Oh, and the fact that he knows Sugar is there at the end. He catches Sugar.
Yeah.
Like he is the only one smart enough to go back to the crime scene.
Right.
And he feels his presence and he chooses not to engage.
Right.
Because he doesn't want to be taken by him.
Yeah.
He thinks there's something wrong, and that ties in with the last scene of the movie where he describes his dreams.
His dream. What was his dream again?
He has a dream. he has two dreams, but the second dream is that he's up in like a mountain pass on a horse, and he sees his dad come by with like a horn of fire,
Holy
and
shit.
his dad like rides ahead, and then they like sit by a fire as if they're old friends, and he talks about the surrealness of being older than his father because he's older than his father was when his father died. So he feels older than his father ever was. So he feels like they're meeting in this strange way. And
That's
he
the
said,
second dream?
yeah, and he said, I don't remember I will have to look up the exact quote, but he says that he feels good, like he feels safe with his father there.
Yeah.
And he's not worried about dying anymore.
Right.
Like he accepts his own mortality. The ending is actually the most positive part of the movie, even though a lot of people hate the ending because it's quote unquote ambiguous, which I don't think it is.
It's
at
certainly
all.
positive. It's absolutely positive.
but-
Why would they spend the whole movie doing all of that and then end it with that? They could have ended it like The Prestige. They could have ended it like in a number of different ways and just gone all in on this guy who, how much have you lost? What's the most you lost on a coin toss? They could have totally just had Shiger, blow the face off of the kid who he like asks for his pants from him because he doesn't have pants or whatever. Right. Like, yeah, that's nonsensical to me. People saying that. So I don't mean to sound so upset about it.
Oh well, yeah. I think a lot of people just don't get the movie and didn't want to think about it beyond. Isn't it funny? Isn't Batman funny in this movie? He's funny because he flips a coin. It's like the guy from Batman.
He has a bowl cut.
He has funny hair.
Listen to his deep voice.
Yeah.
And his like odd death machine that he has.
But that's why something I wanted to say is I disagree that he's inhuman, because the movie goes out of its way to show you how human he is.
Oh yeah.
He gets into the accident just like Llewellyn and then has to pay someone for clothing.
Yeah.
Like it mirrors that they are the same.
I mean I don't think that I'm not necessarily saying he's, a ghost or like he is death. But I think he is representing obviously the darker parts of humanity, but also the dark side of ourselves, the dark side of what money can bring down, the dark side of all of that as well. But yeah, he does have to work within the confines of our world. Yes. He has to work within the confines of humanity, and yeah, working within that. The shots in No Country for Old Men, dear God.
Yeah, brilliantly shot. Roger Deakins kills it.
Yeah.
Just tons of iconic stills, tons of iconic camera moving scenes. Just great landscape shots in general. Like it feels like a well thought out Western. Works as a Western because of that landscape cinematography, but I mean, even outside of those, like just the use of dynamic lighting is frequent, like the rear window copy thing we were talking about before. All the action scenes are done brilliantly.
And also...
Oh, that's another one that I meant to say. Like the North by Northwest, another comparison
to
Hitchcock. When he's running from the truck, which is an absolutely iconic part of the movie. Near the beginning, Llewellyn goes to the site of the drug deal gone wrong to give the guy water, but he's been killed. Not that he died of his wounds. Someone came back and killed him.
Yeah.
And then he gets chased by the truck, similar to Cary Grant being chased by the plane.
Right.
He runs and he goes through the water and shoots the dog, which is just that heart-pounding scene.
That is The Revenant. That one scene from The Revenant.
Yeah.
The Revenant totally is that. That scene done in a slightly different way, but it's the same level of tension, use of water, and like that force, that undeniable force coming at you, and the only response is you gotta kill it. You there's nothing else. You have to kill it, that thing. But what I was gonna say is also the post action scenes in that also are expertly shown, not in a procedural way, but in a way that reflects the wildness of what happened as well. There's the one part where, is it Llewellyn's trailer? I think it's Llewellyn's trailer where Llewellyn has left. Shiger goes.
That was literally what I was going to mention.
Shiger goes there. There's the shot is showing the reflection of him sitting there in the television screen itself. And it's him like sipping a glass of milk, just like sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
And he leaves. And then Tommy Lee Jones comes in after Shiger has left, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he does the same thing because he's snooping around for Llewellyn.
Milk's still cold.
Yeah, the milk is still cold, and then he takes a sip, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the levels of humor within that are just so wild. Like you can't help but laugh in a completely like not completely serious movie, but there are just so many levels to what they're showing. It just shows you the painstaking nature with which they weigh all of the decisions for a scene. Okay, is he gonna enter this way? What's he gonna do in here? Oh, let's have him drink a glass of milk. Okay, all right, cool. That's a cool idea. Okay, he's gonna leave it there, and then Tommy Lee Jones is gonna drink from the same thing. Like, there's so much symbolism within that, right? Mm-hmm. That you just missed the person. That one is chasing after the other. Yeah.
Not only to mention the symbolism of the TV reflection, as
right.
if there's some statement they're making about violence on TV.
Right.
I have to use the bathroom.
Let's pause it.
Yeah.
All right, so back from the bathroom, and I think we have pretty much covered the Coen brothers. Not to keep going on about them. I think we did a decent job.
We didn't talk a lot about their newest stuff.
Right. I'd be more interested in doing an episode down the road when they have released more new stuff that we could talk about.
Yeah, I don't know what their plans are, or if they have movies in production now. I don't think they do.
Right. It seems kind of like they're doing more of their own thing, like individually.
Obviously, for a while.
Obviously, they will come back together.
I know Ethan Coen wrote some plays in the last 10 years. Some Broadway stuff, some off-Broadway stuff.
Interesting. One thing that I wanted to say I don't even know if summate is a word, but summarize the Coen brothers is, I just think that there's so much thematic value from their movies. Obviously in world cinema, historically as well, like it extends into history, the far reachings of history, but also just really capturing the realistic nature of American values, both good and bad parts, and the gray between of American values. The other thing that I wanted to say is that it just shows how grown men still have their childlike wonderment, that they're able to sort of like demonstrate this as professionals in moving art. It's just it's so satisfying seeing like a true artist. I mean, we've talked about this before, but how all kids are born creative, all children, I believe, are creative. In a lot of ways, they either lose it or it's destroyed in many different ways, whether it's through their experience, they have something traumatic happen, or society, or they're not able to hang on to it and they have to do something else that destroys that piece, or they can't, or they don't continue with that. But I just think it's very satisfying and encouraging seeing people who are still working to this day, and their body of work speaks for itself.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I think their most lively movies have been their last two.
Their last two being The Ballad of Buster Scruggs and Macbeth.
Hail Caesar.
Hail Caesar?
Yeah.
Oh,
Like Hail Caesar
okay.
is like
So not Macbeth.
like a 50s
Right.
throwback with musical numbers, and
Right.
Buster Scruggs opens with the ridiculous musical the Buster Scruggs story
Yeah.
where he dies and his ghost is flying up in the sky and you see him, you play him.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in that. There's a lot. Yeah, I mean that's all I have to say about them.
Yeah, I think they'll remain enduring works of, like, a lot of their movies will remain in the American consciousness beyond their lives. And I think they're internationally popular and accredited for a reason, and that's because they, like you said, distill the good and the bad of American life in a very folkish way down to a science that remains funny and dark and thought-provoking.
Awesome. Let's end there.
Then I woke up.